Coming up on We Talk News this week, the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission shuts down an Oregon-owned dispensary chain and revokes all 3 of their state licenses. Plus, the NBA Players Association and the league have opened the door for promotion and investment in the cannabis industry while stopping any testing. Back in the Bay State, Little MJ's Market in Grafton is suing Jushi over bullying tactics with the local town council in Tyngsboro. The Federal Sentencing Commission has urged leniency with nonviolent cannabis convictions, while Connecticut drops over 1,500 cases of cannabis possession. We Talk News with Elena Pinto is next.
So for years, we've been doing manufacturing, financial services, medical, and so forth on businesses that stand alone, from doctors' offices to day traders to even small banks. And so when cannabis came along, all of the tools, skills, and miscellaneous that we learned in there, we were able to apply it for them. And for us, it wasn't that big of a problem or a challenge. It worked great. And so they just needed a reporting feature in one software, and luckily that the software company came through for us, came it back, and now it's become the backbone for our offerings, and it's worked out incredibly well.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News for the week of April 7th. I'm Elena Pinto. Our lead story is one of the most visible developments toward acceptance and normalization of cannabis. The National Basketball Association and that league's player association have reached a tentative new collective bargaining agreement. In that agreement, it will eliminate all testing for cannabis and give opportunities for its players to promote, invest, and use cannabis. This deal still has to be approved by both sides, but both are excited about these changes to ensure labor peace in the NBA for the next 7 years, up to 2030. There are already, though, a number of NBA Hall of Famers who have lent their names to celebrity brands like Paul Pierce and Gary Payton. Chris Webber has started a capital fund, and Sean Kemp is an operator of a dispensary in Washington. Also, Carmelo Anthony has a brand available in California. Many of those players have been interviewed about the use and acceptance of weed on the Conversation with Dave Briggs on Pro Cannabis Media. Now we turn to the Bay State of Massachusetts, where there are no fewer than 3 items with national implications. It's been a busy few weeks for the Cannabis Control Commission, and here's our Massachusetts report with PCM founder Jimmy Young.
Suspensions, lawsuits, bullying. Are these signs that the cannabis industry in Massachusetts is maturing? I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and this is the Bay State Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. The Cannabis Control Commission of Massachusetts revoked the 3 licenses of the Elevate dispensary with a store in Athol and 2 provisional licenses in Williamstown and in Orange. Their owner, Sean Adediji, posted a vicious rant on Instagram that berated his employees and threatened their families. This was not the only time Elevate has had problems with the regulators. In fact, the CCC has a long list of violations that led up to this suspension. Now, he also owns dispensaries in Oregon, and his reputation there isn't great either. In fact, the GM and others in that Oregon operation all resigned after this latest verbal exchange with his workers in Massachusetts. Speaking of the Bay State, and that's what we do here on the Bay State Cannabis Report, it's lawsuit time. MJ's Market in Grafton is a small, locally owned dispensary in the middle of a quiet office industrial park on Centennial Drive in Grafton. Jushi is a giant publicly traded multi-state operator worth millions who did over $284 million in revenue in 22, according to Yahoo Business. Now, MJ's wanted to open a dispensary across the divided highway in Tyngsboro on Middlesex Road, right opposite Jushi. But the town council cited traffic concerns and other reasons that MJ's feels was fueled by Jushi, since they were not concerned when another licensee petitioned for a host agreement. This is another example of why many states ban out-of-state operators from entering legal states. And finally, Framingham-based MCR Labs is accusing the Cannabis Control Commission's investigators of harassment and intimidation during an unannounced inspection of their facility a few weeks ago. Earlier in March, Michael Kahn, the CEO of MCR Labs, accused the CCC for storming his facility and bullying his employees during their intimidating inspection. Well, that's the Bay State Cannabis Report for this week, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News. Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
Overseas in Europe, there is some movement in the German cannabis market. They were supposed to launch in the fall, but delays in European weed markets is no different than here in the States. Well, now the government is saying that that start will happen after the Easter holiday. And Lex Pelger has more in our European report.
I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creation with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Starting off in France, their medical cannabis experiment covering 3,000 patients is running into trouble because they're losing their main supply of CBD oil. Little Green Pharma produced 60% of their CBD oil supply, but now they're going to stop doing that, mostly because they were either selling it way under cost or giving it away for free. Opposition leaders charge that CBD shops are on every corner and somehow this experiment is running out of CBD oil. Are you trying to sabotage this medical cannabis experiment? In related news, authorities removed CBD products from the narcotics list and put them on the poisons list. This will reduce import costs and facilitate finding a new supply of CBD oil for the experiment. In Denmark, after 5 years of medical cannabis, there are now 4 pathways to acquiring medical cannabis products. 14% come through the country's medical cannabis pilot program. Mostly this is flower from Bedrocan and capsules from Aurora. And then 40% are magistral preparations, which is isolated THC and or CBD products made by pharmacists in the pharmacies. And then the rest is pharmaceutical preparations, primarily Sativex and Epidiolex. The pilot program has been dropping off in popularity due to 2 reasons. One is that they're slow to approve new products. Only 8 of the last 63 products have been approved. And it also reimburses much less. And in a country where healthcare is basically free, it is strange for the participants to be paying out of pocket for their medicine. And then 2 small updates from Spain and Switzerland. In Spain, the Medicines Agency is preparing a medical cannabis report to help slowly push that country towards medical cannabis, which is ironic considering it has the wide open cannabis social club scene in all of the EU. Then in Switzerland, as expected, after Basel's successful experiment last year selling cannabis out of pharmacies, Zurich got approval to do the same. So starting this August, participants in Zurich will be able to buy their medical cannabis from pharmacies. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
When will the state of Florida get a legalization question on the ballot? Smart and Safe Florida is the group behind the effort, and Trulieve, one of the biggest MSOs in the industry and the #1 medical distributor and operator, has dropped $25 million on that effort. Right now, Smart and Safe Florida has collected 70% of the signatures necessary to get this legal adult use question on the ballot for 2024. And at the end of March, that group had collected 635,961 valid signatures, with 891,500 plus needed to get it on the 2024 ballot by the end of May. In New York, the state missed an equity plan deadline, and it looks like environmental reports and plans are going to be required for all farmers who are applying for licenses. Pam Chmiel has more from the Empire State.
I'm Pam Chmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York City Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. For the second time, the New York Office of Cannabis Management has missed its deadline to produce a social equity plan. The plan is important because it's meant to guide the rollout of the state's adult use cannabis program. State Senator Jeremy Cooney says the agency must be accountable for its progress in launching the legal market in New York. These guidelines are not just suggestions, but statutory requirements set forth by the state legislature to ensure social and financial goals are met. And in other news, New York's Cannabis Control Board is requiring cultivation operators to provide an energy and environmental plan with their applications. They're asking cultivators to reduce environmental impacts like water usage, energy usage, and carbon emissions. Can cultivators bear the burden given all the other onerous taxes and regulations imposed on them? And finally, MJ Unpacked Trade Show is coming to New York City in a few weeks, where dispensary owners and brands will meet to do business. It will be a much different show compared to last year, now that dispensaries are starting to open throughout the state. That's this week's news that's this week's Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Chmiel from the Mary Jane Society podcast, reporting for Weed Talk News.
On the publicly traded cannabis stocks, iSpire is one of the first to go public this year, and it does look like it fell short of expectations. Our cannabis stock expert is Doug Miller, and he has more on the IPO.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Finally, a new IPO. That's an initial public offering. iSpire, the e-cigarette and cannabis vape hardware company. Well, they began trading on 4/4, and they're under the ticker ISPR, but there are multiple red flags for this company. First, there's no shareholder power. Second, no manufacturing experience. And third, it's immediate dilution when you buy the shares. And they're being honest about all three of them. So they are saying this up front. Let's look at the stock chart. It's only been trading for 3 days. Today it closed at 708. It was up the first day, came down the second day, and it's down even more. So I'll be watching it, and I'll obviously update everybody on this stock because it's a new IPO in the cannabis industry. And that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
The dispensary that was closed down in Massachusetts by the Cannabis Control Commission also has dispensaries in Oregon. And that's where we find Marianne Cursetgee. She lives and works and reports there.
I'm Marianne from Alibi with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. So many things going on this week. The first story is that the second largest dispensary chain in Oregon has failed to pay taxes and vendors. The Willamette Week has uncovered an unprecedented amount of lawsuits, bully claims, and tax liens. All of these misdeeds were hidden under a facade of wealth and generosity, as the owners donated over $200,000 to local politicians and candidates. It's unclear why the OLCC hasn't taken license against their licensee. Another embattled Oregon company is Elevate, a dispensary located in Eugene. The owner also owns 2 dispensaries in Massachusetts. The owner has been arrested for threats and assaults against employees and posted a long rambling threat on Instagram. The Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission responded by revoking his licenses, stating that the acts posed an immediate or serious threat to public health, safety, or welfare. Again, it's unclear why the OLCC hasn't taken action against their licensee. Also, Groundworks, which is a large dispensary chain, has reportedly closed their manufacturing and kitchen facilities and is selling or shuttering. And finally, strict testing requirements are in effect for various mycotoxins and molds. On the surface, this seems like a good thing, but scientists say that the required levels of things like aspergillus are less than what is in the ambient air, so this will cause a number of crops to fail testing. There is a group working with the legislature and OHA to implement emergency changes. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi for Weed Talk News.
If you want to take advantage of the very vibrant cannabis job market, you might want to read relocate to Missouri. Not only are they breaking sales records there, but they are also hiring. And Brandon Jones is driven by the pulse of that new market. And his Missouri report is now sponsored by Baker Brands.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News, sponsored by Baker Brands. Appreciate y'all. So yeah, I'm finally recovered from Oklahoma City and CannaCon, getting my voice back from Lucky Leaf here first in Kansas City, and then the following weekend all the way down to Oklahoma City to go check out CannaCon. Both great events, both a little more centered on business to business. So it was quite a fun, experience meeting all the vendors, talking to all those guys, a lot of big names at all the places. A lot of fun people to interact with, just walking around, seeing lots of fun faces that you wouldn't imagine just walking through an event, and just you're like, holy cow, that's somebody that works with Granddaddy Perp's actual strain, trying to get it, turned out by the FDA to actually show how it helps with sleep. So it was just quite an event. Now I'm back here in Kansas City getting ready for event season. As we all know, it's April, so 420 comes around and everybody has to throw an event prior, right after, and I'll call up 420 events. And then always there's one big, awesome 420 event, hopefully in your area. Here we've got two events. One I'm telling here on my hat is kind of, I would say, more based towards the culture. It's all the people that are going to be around. It's more of a consumption. Mendo Dope is going to be there. But a lot of the local home growers, don't take me wrong, there are going to be the dispensaries and the big boys there, but all the home growers are going to be able to come, be able to consume, be able to be there and just show off their products, share with each other, and just kind of, be part of a big community inside Kansas City. That's on the 15th and 16th. The Artisans of Dank and the Top Shelf crew are putting it on. So if you can go check out Cannafest in Kansas City, it's going to be awesome. And then the next event, like we talked about, hopefully you have a big one on 420 for everybody in your areas. Mine's put on by Smoky River Cannabis. Wiz Khalifa, Burner are going to be here. Mike Tyson, Ric Flair are going to be here in the audience. But that's going to be an unbelievable event where there's consumption lounges and spots that you can go. As long as you're 21, they're just going to check IDs, and you're going to go in with a completely different area with stage, DJ, and then you can actually order cannabis products from the vendors there, and there'll be a delivery service, much like a lift lane, where you're just going to go after you make your order, show your ID to the delivery, and be able to purchase your cannabis right there at the site. They've got a cool little tool now that they can also add to the product if you don't want to bring your pipe and worry about it getting broken up at the event. They've got these fun little disposable pipes that are made of cardboard that you can actually fold into it, and they've got their fun little tag logo on them, and you can fold it out into a little bowl. So you can throw it in the recycling bin when you're done. Don't worry about bringing your glass. Don't break it out at the concert or the event. But I can't believe April is here. Obviously, we got the draft at the end of the month too. So Kansas City is really getting ready to pop off this month. Got to rest up, try to get my voice back. So again, I'm Brandon Jones with B Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Stay educated and medicated. Have a great week, guys.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
If you were wondering about the impact of the failure of Silicon Valley bank collapse, here's one factor. One of the most well-known payroll companies in the US is Paychex with an X. After May 1st, they will stop doing any business with the cannabis industry. About 300 businesses will be affected, and that includes direct deposit, taxpayer services, and other record keeping for employees. Another reason why federal banking reform needs to happen. It's been pretty quiet in the Keystone State lately, but now that state is getting closer to reimbursing medical patients for their medicine. Our Pennsylvania reporter is Claudia Post, and she has more on that story.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. This is a very interesting report in that the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court decided today that under the Commonwealth Medical Marijuana Act and the Pennsylvania Workers' Compensation Act, it is not a violation for an insurance company to reimburse a claimant's costs to obtain medical marijuana. That's a big deal. This pertains to those persons who had been injured at work only. An insurance company or third-party administrator's failure to reimburse an injured worker for out-of-pocket expenses for legally attained medical marijuana will be subject to penalties, the amount of which will be decided by the workers' compensation judge. A growing number of states are learning from Pennsylvania, agreeing that health insurance programs should reimburse patients for their use of medical cannabis products, which is great news. As a part of his 2023-24 budget, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro has proposed taxing illegal adult use marijuana at a rate that is projected to bring in more than $188 million in revenue by the end of the decade. I personally think we're waiting too long, should do it now. Shapiro's budget proposes a 20% tax on the wholesale price of marijuana products sold through a regulated framework of productions and sales once legalized. The proposal includes estimates that assume adult use sales would begin in January 25, which is ridiculous, and bring in about $16 million in tax revenue that year. Okay, well, what happened to 2024? There's a new legislative session and new take on how recreational marijuana should be legalized in Pennsylvania. The new legislation will soon be introduced in the General Assembly, and that, they are saying, would be used through the state store system to sell weed. Now, I'd like to make mention of Pennsylvania and Iowa are the only two states in the union that have state store systems. And this, if they want to crater the adult use program, sell it through the state stores, they'll lose their shirts. Officials say the program would prevent large corporations from gaining an unfair foothold in the industry or creating a monopoly. No, the monopoly is the state store, and ensure the estimated hundreds of millions in tax revenue is wisely used, which again, I doubt. There is bipartisan support for adult use in Pennsylvania. However, with some key differences that could spell success for weed at this time around. It's about time. This bill would also expunge all misdemeanor and low-level cannabis convictions and permit citizens to grow up to 6 plants for personal use. So that's a wrap from Pennsylvania, and I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From We Talk News, have a fabulous week.
The Federal Sentencing Commission announced this week new guidelines for its judges on the sentences for cannabis crimes and urged their federal judges to be more lenient. Our DC correspondent, Andrew Behringer, has more from Washington, D.C. and Maryland.
Hello, my name is Andrew Behringer, and this is the DC Area Report for We Talk News. In federal news, the Federal U.S. Sentencing Commission announced this week that it has approved an amendment to update guidelines on how judges treat prior cannabis possession offenses. Currently, when judges are sentencing people, they look at all aggravating factors and take them into account before making their final decision. This amendment, if passed, would remove cannabis from being viewed as one of those factors during the sentencing process. Now it is up to Congress to vote on this amendment, and if passed, it will be enacted on November 1st. A recent poll has just come out that states 2/3 of Republican voters are likely to vote yes for federal legalization in the upcoming 2024 primary election. This poll was conducted by an organization called CPAIR, or better known as the Coalition for Cannabis Policy, Education, and Regulation, FANCY. This organization is made up of the biggest tobacco and alcohol companies in the industry, such as Altria, Molson Coors, Constellation Brands, and Reynolds American Company, just to name a few. We really have to wonder what their true motives are behind this poll and the upcoming election, and why big alcohol and tobacco are trying to get into the cannabis industry. Finally, do you know what you're doing this 420? As many of you know, 420 is a very well-known cannabis holiday. This 420, cannabis advocates will be holding a cannabis policy forum inside the U.S. Capitol building. In attendance will be top advocates, experts, lawmakers, stakeholders, and patients to advocate for the need for federal legalization. Many lawmakers will also be in attendance, such as Chuck Schumer, who submitted his own cannabis legalization bill last legislative session. Well, that will do it for me and the DC area report for this week. Once again, I'm Andrew Behringer reporting for Weed Talk News. See you next week.
And finally, it looks like New Hampshire is ready to become the 22nd state to legalize adult use of cannabis. The New Hampshire House of Representatives passed an adult use law with bipartisan support by a vote of 272 to 109. House Bill 639 passed, and now it goes to the Senate, where it is also expected to pass. The big question now becomes, will Governor Chris Sununu sign it? In a recent poll, more than 70% of New Hampshire residents support legalization of cannabis use and sales for adults. So if New Hampshire does pass this bill, all 6 of the New England states will have legal adult use of cannabis markets. Another reason to be proud of this neck of the American woods. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Elena Pinto reporting, and remember, it is a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. We'll see you next time.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrols.com.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore, so I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now, if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.